the Rastafari movement is largely Judeo-Christian, in a sense that it placed the Bible in the center of the movement and used the Bible as the final judge of all things African. They biblicize Africa. They talk about the Christian past of Africa. They talk about the silent presence of Jesus in Africa. So they are searching for the Christian God in Africa instead of the African God in Africa. He actually collected about 300 names of African divinities. And all of them call them with one name and say they are God. Say Ramaset is God, Mudimu is God. But it
And
can
it's
be.
questionable.
No, it can be. In the principle of translation. In the principle of translation.
Pardon me.
Welcome back on your channel. I'm your host Nati. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Let's go.
Greetings. My name is Thau Thau Haramanuba, Grandmaster Thau Thau Haramanuba, the great Lumukanda, the earth last immortal. And welcome. Today we are with God, a man we call God, Zamalek Giza.
Greetings to everybody in Dosheni. I'm invited by Thau Thau. I'm here to engage about Rastafari and other activities.
He's before it becomes so fashionable for people to say, I am God having a human experience. This was the man who was going around and say, I'm God. And then when he's sleeping while we're chanting, they'll be like, God, when you are sleeping now, who's guarding creation? No, Mudimu Roberts,
Because, it's because it has much to deal with our Rastafari perspective in that time. In the community of Rastas, they had to perceive Haile Selassie and deify him. And deifying him using monotheist ideology. And the monotheist ideology perceive that God is one whole that controls the whole entire thing. So it will create ideas where God, when it's in a human flesh, it will never be understood. Because the nature of African does have that identity. Just the name God, it's a foreign aspect of viewing things. It is Europeanized. That is why in the polytheist and the Duism, it will never make sense in the monotheist center. Meaning someone who engage with a monastic idea of God, they'll have a problem with the polytheist. Because the polytheist has a different creational stories that are made by these different gods, while the monotheist has one God, and this one God is the one creator that creates everything, govern everything, saying omnipotent, omnipresent. Exactly like Obitek will say, it's a transition or intellectual smuggle of ideas that are European, meaning they intellectually smuggle Hellenic ideas to Africa. So within the Rastas, it has already created that perspective. Their theology is grounded in such ideas rather than African ideas. But the logos, the mentors, the back to Africa. That is why such things as baptism that was practiced within the Melchizedek Church were same as African practice that were long-term practice, going to the river and cleansing, having Ugwambua, Gumbuela, even in Zambia, the Lozis, the Bakwezwa, the Kamba. They have a ceremonial system for in the river going to Nyame Nyame. And then that ceremonial system, they get baptized in some other form, and they will have traditional practices. All that are named Kwambua. Yeah, which means something has been opened. And the king will have a parade with a big elephant. As far as he said, we came with a big elephant here in these lands. And this elephant is called Ngandai. Or Okondwai.
Or Gandai.
Or Gandaya. You can get it being worshipped even in India, since we are the best influence that the elephant itself became a worship, a system. Gandai had his parents. His parents are known as Ngundwa no God. The ones who get unalive and extinct. But that in the Rastafari itself, it has never become a conversation majority of the time. Rather than the conversation, it becomes Ethiopia, and the Solomonic dynasty with the idea of Abrahamic history?
Yeah, well, taking it from the top, maybe, since you mentioned the Rastafari movement. The Rastafari movement is largely Judeo-Christian in a sense that it placed the Bible in the center of the movement and used the Bible as the final judge of all things African, because they're African people. Whatever they do, the energy to gravitate towards the drum and chant the drums, whether Kumina, whether Nyabingi, it stems from their Africanness. So then with that idea, they biblicize Africa. They talk about the Christian past of Africa. They talk about the silent presence of Jesus in Africa. That is why when they go into Egyptology, they start to tell you that Osiris is Jesus or Horus is Jesus. So they are searching for the Christian God in Africa instead of the African God in Africa. Now, this is the part that you mention that they're dressing up African deities with Hellenic clothes. Now, those are the thieves of gods, of our gods. Those are intellectual smugglers. Now, these intellectual smugglers who are thieves of our God, one of them is John Mbiti, famous for writing African religions and philosophy. These are the people who coined a concept called ATR, African Traditional Religion. So these are Christians who are despondent with segregation in the church. These people came up in the South African context in 1888. You have Nehemiah Dile, who established the Tembu Church of South Africa. 1892.
They created a lot of
those
function of churches, like the
but they still
Chambers.
imitate. That is where it is going. But they still imitate the English church, because with the Tembu Church, for example, Nehemiah Dile, one of the early African to be converted to Christianity and to be educated like Dio Soga. So Nehemiah Dile wanted to contribute, he contributed a bull for the circumcision ritual of King Dalinyebo. Now the church criticized him that you are a Christian who's still participating in pagan rituals. So he decided to break away and establish the Tembu Church. And he said, as the King of England is the head of the Church of England, Anglican, the head of Anglican is the King of England, is the English church. So he said, as the King of England is the head of the English church, even the King of the Tembu is the head of the Tembu church. You see, they're imitating the Western church system that did not exist in Africa. Then 1892, you have Mangena Makemukoni here in Pretoria. They established the Ethiopian Church of South Africa. You have a whole lot of them around Soweto. They are very small churches. They are written Ethiopian Church of South Africa, 1892. And then from there, 1910, you have ZCC. 1921, you have Inokum Gijima and the Black Jews or the Hebrew Israelites of Bulhoek Massacre, in East London.
Yes, in East London.
East London. And then 1930, then you have the Rastafari movement. So all of these, they belong to a movement called Ethiopianist movement. So there was the Ethiopianist movement before the Pan-Africanist movement. The Ethiopianist movement, the center of it, the nucleus of it was religion, Judeo-Christianity. Because they quoting from Bible reference. The Garden of Eden was in Ethiopia, Genesis 2 verse 8. Moses married an Ethiopian woman, Numbers chapter 12. All of these scriptures that make reference to Ethiopia. So that inspired the Ethiopian movement from the Tembu Church, which was ethnically based, tribal, to the Ethiopian movement of 1892, which now gave birth to these churches, ZCC, Shembe, which are Africanized Christianity, where they've Africanized Christianity. And they introduced other concept of Sangomas who hide in the church. They call themselves Istunywa today. They talk about Istunywa Sesond. So from the 1930, the culmination of that is the Rastafari movement. But before that, within the context of Jamaica, there were two movement and two books. One movement was inspired by Athley Rogers, who wrote a book called The Holy Pipi, the Black Man's Bible. Yes. And then the other movement was by Ballantyne, which came up with a book called The Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy. So the third movement, 1930, when His Majesty Rastafari was crowned in Ethiopia. So they combined the two books, Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy and the Holy Pipi, which they call the Black Man's Bible, which the bigger version of it actually is in Kimberley. And then the smaller version was in one of those islands of the Caribbean. So then they came up with the Promised Key. Now, the Promise Key originally was supposed to be a book to replace the Bible, because this philosophy of the time was like, put not a book that have a curse of the black man in the altar. So they talk about the curse of Ham, the curse of Ham in the Bible, which the white men used and said, we Africans were Hamitic people. We are dark because God cursed us, because our great ancestor Ham, look at his father nakedness when he was drunk. So this then inspired the Hamitic movement, then the Rastafari movement. Now, this is started now by people who were taken from Africa as slaves, taken from Africa and made slave. Now, slaves were not allowed to read any book, any other book except the Bible. At one time, slaves were not even allowed to play drums. So when they come up to Rastafari and the coronation of His Majesty, they can only interpret it with the only one source that is available to them, which is the Bible.
Yes.
And then you had the four school of thought, one led by Leonard Howell, the other one led by Archibald Dunkley, the other one led by Joseph Nathaniel Hibbert, and then the other one by Robert Hines. So from the beginning, you have multiple school of thoughts. The other one was very Ethiopic.
Can I be controversial here? Because you have already talked about the transition of Christianity or African theology, and then how it has already influenced and have a center thinking, or what we say the epitome of what we call Ethiopianism. Ethiopianism being the political structure, that
religious
made
structure.
the transition. Even we can say polio-religious, meaning it had politics and religion, because it could influence what we call black liberation, black movement.
Like with the ANC
and all those-
1912,
yes.
the people who formed that, some of them were
So
subscribing
my
to that theology.
controversy comes in this, that is it not Leonard Howell who learned with some of who you call Hubbard, L.D. Hubbard, the founder of the Scientology. He learned with him in a ship where they worked together. And in such case, he created the Scientology. And he came with the idea of Rastafarism embodied with Indian practices, Eastern philosophy. Because in that same ship, they used to work in the Eastern or Minor Asia. So all of that create what we call non-black liberational movement or cultural reformation or recognition of African knowledge. Because it creates now what we call Masonic Brotherhood, because we can say the same behavior from Hibbert, who participated in what we call Masonic Lodge of Ethiopia and opened, the Charter 107 in Jamaica, in his parish. So all of that, it doesn't correlate, as you say. It has already created a space of using only religious ideas and Ethiopia as a center and the appeal role model of what is Africa.
It still comes down to what you said, that the dressing up the African divinities with Hellenic clothes. As I was saying, that John Mbiti, he actually collected about 300 names of African divinities. And all of them call them with one name and say they are God. Say Ramasedi is God, Mudimu is God. But it can't be.
Questionable.
It can't be. In the principle of translation.
Pardon me here to interject you. It is questionable that John Mbiti will never be learned in traditional system, and he's learned only in Christian theology and understanding,
he was
and
a theologian.
Proper scholar. With his translation of what we call Kahamba language in Kenya, that he used to translate biblical ascension. The same translation that was made, I think it's 1969. And then when he made that same translation, that translation had no correlation to African traditional practice. He was trying to correlate what we call Christianity to Africans. His reason is to say Christianity, it cannot be the only religion. Africans, they do have a center of what is godly or divinity. Now it strips Africans from what they are, because the Gamba people have a different now, who are speaking the Gamba language, a different practices. And in all those practices, they don't have an idea that has creational systems.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. See you on the next one. Let's go.